The galaxy's most powerful and enlightened alien species gathered in the ornate council chamber, as their voices echoed off the towering marble walls, each of them representing their civilizations from across the stars, their faces cold and indifferent, as they discussed the newest developments among the lesser species in the galaxy. Humans, the primitive race barely worthy of notice, or so they thought. The members of the council sat comfortably in their seats, some of them amused by the idea that humans might one day amount to something. In their eyes, humanity was a species that barely grasped the concept of space travel. How could they possibly compare to the long-lived advanced species in the room? How could they ever challenge the might of the Xanthar, the elusive telepathic beings, or the towering Zelda, whose warships were the size of small moons? A soft murmur of laughter spread through the council at the mention of human achievements. One of the Zelda representatives stood up and looked down upon the assembled human ambassador. The human species had made it into space, sure, but they were far from mastering it, far from reaching the potential of the stars. They were fragile as individuals, prone to infighting and discord. The ambassador, Ilara Reyes, sat motionless, her eyes steady on the council. She had spent years trying to prove humanity's worth, but now it felt like all her efforts were in vain. Each word she spoke about the progress humanity had made fell on deaf ears. She spoke of the advances in technology, the boldness of their explorations, and the very real potential humanity had to contribute to the greater galactic community. But the council was unmoved. They simply didn't care to listen. The debate raged on for hours, each alien species dismissing humanity as a curiosity, at best a nuisance, at worst. Ilara's words were growing hoarse, but she refused to give up. She knew humanity had value. She knew the other species didn't understand the fire that burned within humans, a drive to survive and thrive, that no other species had quite the same way. But before she could speak again, the lights in the council chamber flickered. A soft hum, followed by an urgent transmission from Earth. It was a message from the central command of the human colonies. Ilara's heart skipped a beat as she stood up, a sense of dread creeping into her chest, a message that sent shockwaves through the council. It spoke of something far darker than any political debate. A crisis had emerged. Humanity's children had vanished from every colony across the stars, Earth, Mars, the outer rim worlds, all of them suddenly and inexplicably empty of their young. The message was hurried. The panic in the voices of the parents and authorities was unmistakable, and the council went silent for a moment, not out of concern, but out of confusion. This was an unusual situation, yes, but one that would surely resolve itself, they reasoned. Humans were unpredictable, prone to emotional outbursts. Their children would return eventually. The council didn't see the weight of the loss, the gravity of the situation. And as they continued to dismiss the growing crisis, Ilara's mind began to race. What was happening to the children? What force could snatch them away without a trace? She knew she had to act quickly. No one else would care enough to investigate. No one else would recognize the danger before it was too late. The council could ignore her all they wanted, but she would not sit idle. She would find out what had happened to the children, and she would make the galaxy understand just how wrong they were about humanity. The days after the message from Earth passed in a blur for Ilara. Her team was working around the clock trying to find any clue, any trace that might explain the disappearance of humanity's children. At first, it seemed like an isolated incident, a freak occurrence, but soon it became clear that the scope was far larger than anyone had imagined. Children were disappearing across every human colony, Earth, Mars, the moons of Jupiter, even the distant outposts along the fringes of known space. No one was spared. The reports began to flood in, families in panic, authorities scrambling to find answers. But no one knew where to look. No one knew how to even begin to search for children who had vanished without a trace, as if they had been erased from existence entirely. The usual signs were absent. No kidnappers, no signs of struggle, no security footage of abductions, no fingerprints or DNA left behind. It was as if the children had simply blinked out of reality. Ilara felt the weight of the situation pressing down on her shoulders. She had seen humanity face many crises, but this was different. Something was out of place. Something deeper was at work. She couldn't shake the feeling that the disappearance of the children wasn't just a random tragedy, but the beginning of something much darker. Her team pored over every piece of data, trying to find any connection between the incidents, but the evidence led them nowhere. until one of the technicians noticed something odd. There was a pattern, a subtle one, but it was there, a strange signal emanating from deep space. It wasn't like anything humans had ever encountered before. It wasn't random noise. It was a deliberate signal, one that seemed to pulse with an almost unnatural regularity. They tracked the signal to a remote part of the galaxy, an area not charted by the humans, not part of their usual routes. It was on the edge of known space, beyond the reach of most explorers, a place where few dared to venture. Ilara knew this was no coincidence. This signal had to be connected to the disappearances. It was their only lead, and with every passing moment, the stakes grew higher. She briefed her team and made the decision to investigate the source of the signal. They would travel to the outer edges of known space, to a place most people considered a dead zone, to find out who or what was behind the vanishing children. Ilara gathered the best minds among her crew, brilliant scientists, engineers, and tacticians, all of them eager to find answers. As they prepared for the mission, Ilara felt a growing sense of unease. She had spent years navigating the politics of the galaxy, but this was different. This was personal. These were human lives at stake, and no one else seemed to care. She knew that the Council would dismiss her search as another human obsession, a pointless pursuit of an anomaly they wouldn't understand. But she wasn't going to stop. She couldn't. If there was any chance that the children could be saved, if there was any chance to stop whatever force was behind this, she would find a way. The moment they entered the unknown space, the feeling of isolation was palpable. The stars here seemed distant and cold. The vast emptiness of the region pressed against them like a weight. As they neared the source of the signal, their instruments began to pick up strange readings, energy fluctuations, unlike anything they had ever encountered before. These weren't natural. They were artificial. Something powerful was at work, something that didn't belong in this part of the galaxy. And as they moved closer, the silence around them grew more oppressive, as if the very fabric of space was holding its breath. The deeper they ventured into the unknown, the more Ilara felt the weight of what they were about to face. The energy readings were growing stronger now, pulsing like a heartbeat. Their ship rocked slightly as they moved closer to the source, but no one said a word. The crew was too focused on the readings, too tense to speak. As the ship cut through the empty space, the atmosphere inside the cockpit was thick with anticipation. The silence was broken by the voice of one of her officers, a soft but urgent whisper that made Ilara's blood run cold. "There's something out there," the officer said, pointing to the screen. The black void of space had shifted. There was a shadow moving within it, a shape too large to be a natural formation, yet too still to be a ship. The shape seemed to pulse in rhythm with the strange energy readings they had been tracking. Ilara felt her stomach churn. The realization that they were no longer alone hit her like a punch. She ordered the ship to slow, and the crew immediately began adjusting their course. As they drew closer, the shadow grew more defined. It wasn't just a ship, it was something far more ancient and terrifying. It looked almost like a colossal structure floating in space, its surface pitted and scarred, as though it had been weathered by millennia of neglect. The sheer size of it made the human vessel feel like an insect in comparison. The shape of the structure was alien to anything they had ever encountered. Its angles were wrong. It defied the typical symmetry of known technology. It was as though it had been built by a mind completely different from their own. Ilara's heart raced as they approached the structure. It was surrounded by a field of static energy that made their instruments malfunction. The ship's systems flickered and hummed in protest, as if the very presence of the structure was warping space itself. They tried to communicate, but no response came. The stillness was unnerving. Ilara signaled for a landing party to prepare, but just as they were about to board the alien ship, the energy field flared to life, and a massive force shook their vessel. They were thrown against their restraints. As the ship rocked violently, Ilara's mind raced. What was happening? Were they under attack? No one knew, but the shake subsided as quickly as it began, and the energy field surrounding the ship flickered back to a steady pulse. "We're being watched," one of the crew said nervously. Ilara looked at the screen again and saw something that sent chills down her spine. The shadow of something moving within the structure, something massive and ancient, an alien force that dwarfed their understanding. It had been waiting for them. They were not the first humans to come here, but they might be the last. They had no idea who or what was behind this, But Ilara knew one thing for sure: the disappearance of the children was no accident. It was a deliberate act, one that had been planned for far longer than anyone could have imagined. The structure in front of them was the key to everything. The answers to the mystery were inside it, but they would have to survive what lay within to find them. As the ship docked with the alien structure, Ilara took a deep breath, steeling herself for what was to come. The door to the structure opened with a hiss, revealing nothing but darkness ahead, and Ilara stepped forward, knowing that whatever awaited them within would change everything. The moment Ilara stepped onto the cold metallic floor of the alien structure, a chill ran down her spine. The silence inside was absolute. No hum of machinery, no whisper of air, no sound at all. The air was thick with a strange tension, as if the space itself was waiting for something to happen. The crew followed her cautiously, weapons drawn, their footsteps echoing through the hollow corridors of the structure. Their lights illuminated walls covered in symbols and patterns, none of which made any sense to them. But there was an unmistakable feeling of age here. This place had been abandoned for eons, yet its design suggested it had once been a center of power, something far beyond their understanding. They moved deeper into the structure. The passageways twisted and turned, leading them through narrow hallways that seemed to stretch endlessly. The deeper they went, the more disorienting it became each turn, feeling like a step further into an abyss. Ilara's heart pounded in her chest, her mind racing with questions. What had happened here? Who had built this place? And why had the children been taken? The further they ventured, the more oppressive the atmosphere became, until they reached a massive chamber, its walls lined with strange glowing crystals that pulsed with an eerie light. The air felt heavy here, thick with some unseen force. The center of the room held an enormous structure like a throne, but not one meant for sitting, more like an altar. It was covered in strange symbols too complex to decipher. But one thing was clear: this place was not meant for humans. This was something alien to their very essence. Just as they began to examine the altar, a voice suddenly echoed through the chamber, cold and distant. It spoke in a language they couldn't understand, but the meaning was clear. The children had been taken for a purpose, not just by chance, but as part of a much larger plan, a plan centuries in the making, a plan that would shape the future of the galaxy. The voice spoke of an ancient race, one that had once ruled the stars long before humanity had even begun to evolve. It spoke of their downfall and how they had learned to manipulate other species for their own survival. The voice revealed that the Ostracs had been watching humanity for centuries. The children were taken to create a new generation, to harness a power that no one had ever anticipated: humanity's potential. It was that potential that had terrified the Ostracs. They had seen in humanity the ability to rise above their limitations, to adapt and survive in ways no other species had ever done before. The Ostracs had hoped to prevent that rise by taking the children away, severing the future of humanity before it even began. But the Ostracs had made a critical mistake. They had underestimated humanity's resilience, the ability to evolve, adapt, and fight back against all odds. The more Ilara listened, the more she realized the truth. Humanity had never been the primitive species the Ostracs thought they were. They were something far more dangerous, something that could not be controlled or predicted. The children were not just innocent victims. They were the key to unlocking humanity's true power, and the Ostracs had made the gravest error of all by taking them. Ilara's thoughts were interrupted by a low hum that seemed to vibrate through the walls. The chamber began to shake. The lights flickered as the ship's systems began to report strange fluctuations in energy. Ilara knew they had to act quickly. Whatever the Ostracs were doing to control the situation was happening now. She motioned to her crew, and they quickly moved to intercept the source of the disturbance, knowing that they were running out of time. The future of humanity and their children depended on it. As the chamber trembled under the increasing hum, Ilara's mind raced. She realized the hum wasn't just random. It was a signal. It was the Ostracs preparing something that would not only affect them, but the entire galaxy. The power surging through the walls seemed to reach into her very bones. She could feel it growing stronger every second. The air was charged with tension. It was a force that was not meant for humans to endure. And yet here they were standing at its core. The Ostracs had made a grave mistake, thinking they could manipulate humanity without understanding the sheer strength of their will and adaptability. Elara knew that humanity's true potential lay in their creativity, their ability to push boundaries in the face of overwhelming odds, but they had to act fast to ensure that the Austracs didn't succeed in whatever they were trying to do. The crew moved with purpose, now their mission clear. Elara called for a tactical strike team to infiltrate the central control room, where the energy fluctuations seemed to be originating. But just as they began to move forward, something unexpected happened. The walls of the chamber shifted, the stone panels receding with a grinding noise, to reveal an enormous figure standing in the doorway, its shape immense and shadowed. The figure was unlike anything they had encountered before. It was clearly not human, but neither was it one of the Austracs. A new alien race stood before them, towering and imposing, its body covered in intricate armor made of materials that shimmered with a strange glow, its eyes glowing an unnatural blue. Elara's crew drew their weapons instantly, but she motioned for them to hold their fire. The figure stepped forward, and its voice boomed through the chamber. Like thunder, it spoke in the same language as the mysterious voice they had heard earlier, but this time Elara understood it clearly. "You are too late," the figure said, its voice reverberating through the room. "The children are beyond your reach, and the future has already been set in motion." Elara stepped forward, her heart hammering in her chest. She refused to let this be the end. "Who are you?" she demanded. "Why have you taken them? What is this place?" The figure's laugh was cold, almost amused. "I am the last of the old ones, the true rulers of the galaxy. We were the ones who first brought the Austracs into existence. They were nothing more than our creations, but now they have outlived their usefulness. The children you speak of are the final piece of a long-forgotten plan." Elara felt her blood run cold. The old ones had existed long before any of the known races, and they had been the architects of the galaxy's greatest powers, including the Austracs. The structure they stood in was not just an ancient relic. It was a weapon designed to harness the latent potential of humanity and use it to reshape the galaxy to their will. "You will not succeed," Elara said through gritted teeth, her resolve hardening. "You've underestimated humanity's strength." The figure's glowing eyes narrowed. "No, you misunderstand," it said, its voice dropping to a whisper. "We never underestimated you. We have only been waiting for this moment, the moment when you finally realize your true potential and join us in rewriting the galaxy." Elara's mind reeled at the words. This was no ordinary power struggle. The old ones had been manipulating not just the Austracs, but humanity itself. All along they had orchestrated humanity's rise, knowing that eventually they would be the key to a new era. But Elara knew one thing above all else: they couldn't let the old ones control humanity's future. She motioned for her crew to move quickly. They couldn't waste any more time. The battle for the children and for the future of the galaxy was just beginning. The tension in the chamber grew unbearable as Elara faced the figure of the old one, her mind racing to process everything that had just been revealed. The truth that the Austracs were not the true architects of the galaxy's manipulation, that the power they had been fighting against was even older, even more dangerous than they had imagined. The old ones were not just manipulating humanity's evolution, they had shaped it from the very beginning. They had known humanity's potential and had guided their rise with a cruel hand to bring them to this point, the moment when the children would become the final piece of a twisted plan, one that would see humanity's future rewritten in ways they could not fathom. But Elara's resolve hardened. She would not let this happen, not after everything humanity had fought for, not after seeing how they had overcome every obstacle in their path. She refused to let them be nothing more than pawns in someone else's game. "We will never join you," Elara said through clenched teeth, her voice steady, even in the face of this overwhelming force. "We will fight you with everything we have." The old one smiled, and it was a cold, terrifying smile. "You misunderstand again," it said. "We do not ask for your submission. We do not require your obedience. We only ask for your understanding, for you to see the potential within you that we have always seen. We have waited for this moment, when humanity would come to know its place in the grand design." Elara's eyes blazed with fury. "Your design will be destroyed. We are not your tools, and we never will be." She turned to her crew, signaling them to prepare for action. They could not wait any longer. The energy readings were spiking, and she knew the weapon was about to be activated. The Old One's smile faded slightly. "You are too late. The children have already been altered, and when the power surges, they will be activated. You will not be able to stop it." The walls of the chamber began to hum in response to the Old One's words. As the ship's systems began to report dangerous fluctuations in energy, Ilara felt the very air shift around them. The structure was coming alive. It was beginning to power up. They had to stop it now. They couldn't afford to hesitate. Her tactical officer tapped her shoulder, his voice urgent. "We need to disable the core, or we'll lose everything." Ilara nodded and motioned to the team to split up. They had to hit the central control room, where the energy was being funneled to the device that would unleash the power the Ostracs had designed to control humanity's fate. They rushed through the twisting corridors of the structure, their weapons at the ready, but as they moved, the very walls seemed to shift and change, blocking their path, creating new obstacles, each turn bringing them deeper into the labyrinth of this ancient place. It was a trap. They were being herded toward the heart of the weapon, and they had no choice but to move forward. "We need to hurry," Ilara said, her voice sharp. "We can't let the activation sequence complete." They pushed forward despite the growing sense of dread that pressed in from all sides. The hum of the structure grew louder and louder as they approached the heart of the weapon. The air grew thick with an unnatural energy, and Ilara felt her skin tingle with the raw power surging through the walls. They reached a large chamber at the center of the structure, where the core of the weapon stood, a massive glowing orb of energy, pulsating with an intensity that made the entire room vibrate. The children's altered DNA was linked to this power. The Old Ones had set everything in motion long ago, and now it was time to unleash it. But Ilara and her crew weren't done yet. They would fight with every ounce of strength. They had to stop the Old Ones from rewriting humanity's future. The moment they entered the chamber, the Old One's voice echoed once again. "It's too late," it said softly. "You cannot stop what has already begun." The glow of the core was blinding as Ilara and her crew entered the chamber. Its pulsing energy filled the air like a living thing, a suffocating presence that seemed to press in on them from all sides. The children's DNA was interwoven with the power of the core. It was their altered essence that would trigger the final event that would change humanity forever. The Old Ones had manipulated everything to this point, and now they were about to reap the reward of centuries of planning. Ilara could feel the weight of the moment pressing on her every step, each breath more labored than the last. The walls hummed with raw energy. Her mind raced with the knowledge that humanity's future hung in the balance. There was no turning back now. They had to stop this before it was too late. "We have to shut it down," Ilara said, her voice strained but resolute. "We cannot let this power reach full activation." The crew moved into position, setting up makeshift barricades to shield themselves from the core's overwhelming energy. But there was no easy way to approach the machine. It was surrounded by a field of unstable energy that prevented them from getting too close. One of the crew members scanned the area and tapped his device. "There's a weakness in the system," he said, pointing to a flickering panel on the far side of the room. "If we can get there, we can trigger an overload. It'll destabilize the core. But we have to be quick." Ilara nodded, her heart pounding as she signaled for the team to move out. They had no time to waste, and the Old One's influence was growing stronger. The moment they attempted to deactivate the core, the lights flickered, and the chamber seemed to vibrate with an unseen force. The power surged again, and the air crackled with energy. Ilara knew that they were being watched, that the Old One was waiting for them to fail. But they would not fail. They couldn't. They made their way across the chamber as the ground beneath them seemed to tremble with each step. The energy field surrounding the core lashed out in violent waves, knocking the crew back each time they got close. But they pushed forward undeterred, every step taking them closer to the panel they needed to access. As they neared the control station, a low growl rumbled through the air, and Ilara saw movement out of the corner of her eye, turning just in time to see an enormous figure step into the room. It was the Old One, but now it had transformed. Its shape had grown even larger, its eyes glowing brighter with an unnatural fury. It was no longer just a figure standing in the shadows. It was a force of nature, a manifestation of the power they had been trying to stop. and it was coming for them. Ilara drew her weapon and fired, but the blast barely made an impact. The Old One raised its hand, and the air itself seemed to shift with a powerful force, knocking the crew to the ground. Ilara scrambled to regain her footing, struggling to breathe against the oppressive energy in the room. The Old One spoke, its voice like the rumble of distant thunder. "You cannot stop this," it said, its voice laced with both arrogance and finality. "Humanity was never meant to rise beyond its place. The children will be the first of a new order, and you will be forgotten." Ilara's mind was racing. They were being overwhelmed. The Old One was too powerful to defeat directly, and the core was still charging. They had no time to waste. She glanced over at the panel. The weakness was still there. She made a decision in that moment. Her only choice was to sacrifice herself to ensure the others could finish the mission. She looked at her team and spoke firmly. "I'll hold them off. You get to the panel." Without waiting for a response, she charged toward the Old One. With all the strength she had left, her weapon raised, she wouldn't let the Old Ones have this victory, not while she still had breath left to fight. Ilara charged at the Old One, her every movement fueled by desperation. She knew she was no match for its immense power, but she wasn't trying to defeat it. She was trying to buy time. Her heart pounded as she sprinted toward the towering figure, every step feeling like a struggle against gravity itself. The Old One watched her with cold amusement as she drew closer. Then it raised its hand again, and a wave of force erupted from its palm, sending Ilara crashing backward into the wall. But she wasn't done yet. Even as her body screamed in pain, she pushed herself up. She wouldn't stop. She couldn't. She had to make sure the others succeeded with everything inside her. She ran again, this time dodging the energy blasts that followed in her wake. She reached the Old One in a blur of motion, and without thinking she launched herself at its legs, her body colliding with its armored surface. The Old One roared in anger, shaking her off with an ease that sent her skidding across the floor. But Ilara scrambled to her feet, her vision blurred with pain. She could see the rest of her crew moving toward the control panel, their determination matching her own. And then she saw it, the flickering weakness in the energy field surrounding the core. It was just a momentary vulnerability, but it was enough. Her mind raced as she realized what she had to do. She couldn't stop the Old One alone, but maybe she could turn its own power against it. Ilara reached for a nearby console, her fingers flying over the controls. Despite the searing pain in her body, she input a series of commands that would reroute the energy from the core to the surrounding systems. She had no idea if it would work, but it was the only chance they had. The Old One turned to face her once more, and she saw the fury in its eyes. It would not let her interfere with its plans. But Ilara didn't back down. She held her ground, staring up at the massive being as she spoke through gritted teeth. "You've made a mistake," she said. "You don't understand humanity at all." With a final push, Ilara activated the override, and the chamber shuddered as the power began to destabilize. The Old One's voice erupted in fury as it tried to regain control of the core. But it was too late. The energy was already spiraling out of its control, and the unstable power surged through the chamber in a brilliant flash of light. The Old One roared as the energy backlash sent it crashing into the far wall of the chamber. The air itself seemed to warp and twist as the core destabilized. Everything around them shook with the power of the collapse. Ilara's crew dove for cover as the room exploded in a flash of white light. She closed her eyes against the brilliance of the blast and felt the force of the explosion rattle her to the core. When the light faded, Ilara was lying on the floor, her body battered but still alive. The chamber was in ruins. The core had overloaded, and the Old One's form was nowhere to be seen. But Ilara knew they had succeeded. They had stopped the plan that would have rewritten humanity's future, but the cost had been great. Her crew slowly began to rise from their cover. They were battered but alive. The children's DNA had been saved from the grip of the Ostracs, and the Old Ones, their future was still theirs to shape. Ilara struggled to her feet, looking around at the devastation. The ancient structure was crumbling around them, but humanity had survived. They had proven their strength, their will to fight against overwhelming odds. The galaxy would never be the same. The Old Ones' plans were in ruins, but humanity's journey was just beginning. They had shown that no force, no matter how ancient or powerful, could crush their spirit. They had won this battle, but the future of the galaxy was still unknown. Ilara looked at her crew, her heart swelling with pride. "We've done it," she said softly. And though the galaxy was still a dangerous place full of mysteries, they now knew one thing for certain: humanity would never again be underestimated. They would rise to meet every challenge and write their own future.